her eyes flicking toward the small table where a bowl of soft bread and a wedge of crumbly cheese waits for you. You eat slowly, watching as your brother sharpens a small knife on a sandstone slab, his movements clumsy but earnest. After the meal, you carry a bundle of broken reeds out beyond the fence to burn, the tiny fire crackling as the sun slips away behind the far hills. The wind picks up just slightly, lifting your tunic at the corners and rustling the nearby thorn bushes, but it carries no coolness, no promise of change. Still, you breathe it in deeply, letting the dryness fill your lungs, letting the fading light press softly against your skin. Night comes, as it always does, not with suddenness, but with a gradual thickening of air and sky, the world slipping gently into dusk without protest. You lie back on the mat near the door, arms behind your head, watching the stars appear like careful stitches across the deepening blue. And again, the question of rain does not come, not because you've stopped asking, but because the asking has grown quiet inside you, folded into the rhythm of days that need no answer. Sleep takes you then, not in a rush, but in a slow drift, as though you've been floating toward it all day, carried by dust and light and the small, steady work of a life lived where nothing hurries and everything continues. The 27th day opens without fanfare, ushered in by the soft light that spills slowly into the courtyard, like a guest too polite to knock, warming the stone and woven mats where dew rarely forms and nothing grows unless forced to fight for it. You stir beneath your shawl as the first sounds of life begin their gentle return. The low grumble of a donkey waking nearby, the scratch of a broom brushing sand from a threshold, the creaking of a wooden beam as someone above adjusts a jar. On a rooftop ledge, you rise without speaking, your movements quiet, fluid, shaped by the muscle memory of countless mornings just like this. Your mother is near the fire pit already, coaxing flame from embers with slow, circular motions of her hands, the smoke rising in lazy spirals toward the open sky. She doesn't look up, but hands you a small cloth bundle, a sign that today your errand lies beyond the village. The small shrine outside the settlement, tucked into the fold between two wind-worn hills, has gone untended for weeks. It is not a sacred place in the strictest sense. There are no offerings, no priests, no chants, but it holds stories, and those are sometimes even more important. You carry a gourd of water, a rag, and a small jar of clay sealant. The walk is long and sunlit, the sky a pale bowl above you, empty but not threatening, just infinite and present. As you leave the last home behind, the wind picks up slightly, tugging at the corners of your robe and sending loose grains of sand dancing along the path like tiny, determined insects. The land stretches before you, dotted with stubborn shrubs, twisted rock, and the occasional low sound of life. A distant bird, a lizard, scuttling across stone, the echo of your own footsteps, carried back at odd intervals. When you reach the shrine, it's just as you remember, no more than a waist-high stone niche, set against a slab of weathered rock, its walls etched with old symbols, their meanings forgotten or changed. Dust has gathered in the hollows, and the small bowl once used to hold oil has tipped sideways, half buried in grit. You kneel beside it and begin to clean, first brushing off the sand with your palm, then dampening the cloth and wiping slowly, patiently, until the symbols re-emerge in the afternoon light. You patch a small crack with the clay sealant, smoothing it into place with your thumb, and reposition the oil bowl. Though there is no oil to place in it, still, it feels complete. You sit then, cross-legged, staring out over the plain below. The village is visible in the distance, a soft cluster of brown and red nestled against the landscape. And for a moment, the wind dies entirely. The silence is so complete, it feels almost like sound itself, a deep, ringing absence that wraps around you and pulls your thoughts inward. You think of nothing and everything, of how long the land has waited, how long you have waited, and how little it seems to matter when each day carries its own completeness. After a long while, you stand, stretch your legs, and begin the walk home. The sun is lower now, casting your shadow long ahead of you, bending it over the uneven path, as if trying to lead you somewhere you've already been. When you return, the village has shifted slightly into evening, smoke rising from rooftops, a girl laughing softly as she pours water over her feet, your uncle repairing a strap on a clay jar with a length of twine. You place the gourd back near the basin and wash your hands slowly, the water now warm from the long sun. Supper is already being prepared, a mash of lentils and spiced squash, scooped onto flatbread and wrapped tight, served with small slices of salted lemon. You eat in calm silence, the sky above darkening by degrees, stars blooming slowly into their usual places. Afterward, your brother asks about the shrine, and you tell him only that it looked the same, that it was still there, that it didn't ask for anything. He nods, as if that's the only answer he needed. You sit for a while on the low stone bench in the courtyard, listening to the creak of a wind catcher turning lazily overhead, the last fire dying to a quiet glow near your feet. Somewhere in the village, someone begins to hum. No words, no melody, you know, but the sound drifts easily through the air, slipping between homes and over walls. Like smoke, you lie down on the mat with your arms behind your head, the day still moving softly through your limbs, and you let your eyes close as the stars wheel overhead in their usual, unhurried arcs. There is no urgency to sleep, just as there was none to the day. And as your breath deepens and the wind returns to run light fingers across your cheek, you sink into the long, open silence once again, the kind of silence that doesn't ask for dreams, but simply holds you, steady and still, until the next day folds itself into being. The 28th morning arrives, not with fanfare or change, but with the same quiet unfolding that has marked each day before, light slipping across clay walls like a whisper, shadows stretching out in long, slow arcs across the hard-packed earth, and the faint sound of pottery clinking together as your mother arranges bowls near the basin. You open your eyes slowly, your body already half aware that another day of stillness has begun. The air is dry, as always, but carries a new scent today, a faint bitterness, like crushed seed or warm stone, something that doesn't bring hope exactly, but curiosity. You rise and step barefoot into the courtyard, where your sister is drawing a line of water across the edge of the garden bed, using a small jug, her movements practiced, and without rush. She greets you without turning, a tilt of her head, the only acknowledgement. Today is a day for sorting. The storehouse has grown crowded with bundles of dried herbs, stalks of millet, and jars whose labels have faded. And it's time to reorder them before the next cycle of barter and trade begins. You eat a small breakfast, flatbread and date syrup, the sweetness clinging faintly to your lips, and head toward the storage area near the edge of the village, where cool shade clings stubbornly to the thick adobe walls. Inside, the air is still, filled with the mingled aromas of cumin, dried citrus peel, dust, and clay. You and two others begin untying bundles of dried stalks, snapping them free of their fibers and sorting them by weight, scent, and texture. There are no labels, just memory passed down through quiet instruction. This one eases the stomach. That one sharpens the tongue. This bundle is used for wounds. That one for dye. You don't speak much as you work. Only the occasional exchange of a name or a small correction when someone places something in the wrong pile. The rhythm becomes a kind of meditation. Pull, shake, snap, place. The silence between you isn't empty. It's full of presence. In the middle of the day, you step outside for a break, sitting beneath a low awning near the animal pen. The goats chew lazily nearby, their eyes half-lidded, their tails flicking now and then, as if to mark the passage of time. You drink cool water from a jug wrapped in wet cloth, the rim rough against your lips. A boy walks by, balancing a basket of figs on his shoulder, and you nod at one another, no words exchanged. When you return to the storehouse, the light has shifted, and the bundles glow faintly in the filtered light that sneaks in through the high-slit windows. You begin sorting the clay jars next, brushing off layers of dust, gently shaking each to hear what remains inside. Beans, dried berries, husks of something long forgotten. Occasionally, you find a cracked one, and you set it aside to be ground into powder for use in plaster. The day passes like this, quietly, deliberately, full of small decisions and subtle gestures, the kind of labor that doesn't demand notice but builds the spine of daily life. As evening approaches, the storehouse takes on a golden glow, the jars casting long curved shadows that stretch across the floor like sleeping animals. You step back, out into the air, blinking at the brightness, your back sore and fingers coated in a fine layer of dust and spice. The village is alive with evening rituals. A woman sprinkling water over her threshold, a man trimming the edge of a leather strap, children dragging sticks through the sand to create imagined maps. You head home, where your mother is stirring a thick porridge of lentils, garlic, and dried squash over the fire. The smell is comforting and earthy, like the feeling of slipping on a robe still warm from the sun. You help lay out bowls and mats, straightening corners and tucking frayed edges beneath woven layers. Dinner is eaten in near silence, the fire crackling gently behind you, and afterward, your father sharpens a metal blade on a stone, the scraping rhythmic and slow. You sit with your back against the wall, your eyes heavy, listening to the steady hush of the village settling into night. The stars begin to blink to life above, scattered across the sky like seeds, and you step out briefly into the open air, letting the cool breeze pass over your face. A small lantern flickers near the door, and a cricket sings somewhere nearby, its sound stretching into the stillness like a thread. You lie down on your mat with a deep exhale, your limbs sinking heavily into the fabric, your thoughts barely forming before sleep begins to gather them away. Once again, there is no rain, no change, but the absence of change no longer feels like something missing. It feels like something whole. And as you drift into sleep beneath a sky that never hurries, you feel the slow, ancient rhythm of this life wrap itself around you once more, steady, quiet, and complete. The 29th day begins in the hush before the breeze wakes, in the pause before the sun clears the horizon and sends its light across the rooftops like a quiet promise never meant to be kept. You rise with the same ease that has settled into your limbs over these many mornings. The stillness around you, familiar, almost tender. The mat beneath you creaks softly as you fold your shawl and place it in its usual corner. Outside, the courtyard carries the scent of last night's ashes, the faint tang of old smoke, and earth rising gently into the early air. Your sister is squatting near the basin, washing the smaller clay bowls with a piece of frayed palm fiber, her sleeves rolled to her elbows and her hair tied back in the same knot she's worn since you could remember. You join her for a few minutes, passing bowls from her hand to the low shelf beside the hearth, drying each with the corner of your robe. There is no conversation, none needed. A look, a nod, a half smile, that's all. Today, you are assigned to assist the potters at the edge of the village, where the kilns squat low and round like sun-baked creatures, half buried in dust. It's a task you don't often do, but one you've always found strangely comforting, kneading, shaping, turning soft earth into something that will last long after you're gone. You eat quickly before heading out. A small roll of bread, dry but sweetened with pressed dates, and a few sips of goat's milk, watered down and chilled overnight. The path to the pottery yard is lined with sun-warped fence posts and tufts of dry grass that crunch beneath your feet. As you approach, the scent of clay and fire greets you before any person does. The head potter, an old man with hands like cracked riverbeds, waves you over without a word and points to a low bench near a mound of wet clay. You kneel beside it, pressing your fingers into the cool, yielding mass, and begin to fold and shape as instructed, pressing out air, rolling into long strands, pinching the beginnings of bowls and jars that will one day carry water, grain, or oil. The work is rhythmic, almost musical in its quiet cadence, and you quickly lose yourself in it. Around you, others move slowly but deliberately, one shaping wide basins with practiced palms, another smoothing the edges of a lid with a scrap of damp cloth, a third stoking the fire beneath a kiln with goat dung and dry brush. No one hurries. The pace is set by the material itself. The clay resists too much force, too much urgency. It insists on patience. You find that your breathing has matched the pace of your hands, and hours pass without your awareness. When the sun is nearly overhead, the potters break for food. You're given a handful of salted beans wrapped in flatbread and a wedge of preserved lemon. You eat in the shade of the kiln wall, your back against the warm clay. The food gritty, but filling. Someone hums nearby, a low, tuneless sound that blends perfectly into the wind and fire. In the afternoon, the work shifts to drying and marking. You carry pieces to the racks near the edge of the yard, setting them out to harden in the sun, turning each carefully so it doesn't crack or warp. Then, you take a fine reed and etch simple markings onto their surfaces. Lines, dots, spirals, symbols that speak of maker, purpose, and place. You're careful not to press too deeply, letting the motion guide your fingers like writing a message meant to be forgotten. As the light begins to soften and the shadows stretch long across the yard, you wash your hands in a basin of brown water and say your goodbyes with nods and brief glances. The walk home is slower now, your legs tired, your arms powdered with dry clay, but your mind quiet, soothed by the repetition and silence of the day. The village meets you with the soft hum of preparation. A woman sweeping the space outside her door. Two boys tying bundles of sticks. A group of elders sitting in a circle, their conversation slow and sparse. You return to your courtyard, where your mother is ladling stew into bowls. Lentils, again, with dried turnip and thin slices of cured meat left from last week's barter. You wash, eat, and help clean without needing to be asked. Your movements fluid, nearly thoughtless, like dance steps passed down over generations. Later, as the sky darkens and the wind rises just enough to make the palm fronds whisper against one another, you step outside with a blanket and find your usual spot near the fig tree. The stars are already visible, even before full dark has fallen, and they watch you with the same indifference and grace they offer every night. You lie down, the blanket pulled over your chest, and close your eyes to the soft wind and the scent of sun-warmed stone. The clay dust still clings to the creases of your hands, and your fingers curl slightly, remembering the weight and form of the bowls they shaped. As you drift toward sleep, you think not of rain, not of clouds or omens, but of hands shaping earth, of fire warming clay, of quiet labor and quiet rest. And then the thoughts dissolve, and only stillness remains, the deep, echoing stillness of a world that waits without sadness and dreams without sound. The 30th day arrives with a hush that feels older than the village itself, a quiet so complete it seems to stretch back through time, as if the land is holding its breath in some unspoken agreement with the sky. You wake to the pale gray before dawn, when even the birds have not yet begun their tentative chirps, and the air feels cooler than usual, not cold, but touched with something unfamiliar, something that might be change, or might simply be a trick of the wind. Your eyes adjust slowly to the dim interior, and you sit up, letting the blanket fall away in folds. You stretch, your joints cracking softly in the silence, and walk barefoot to the door, where the wooden frame creaks as you press against it. Outside, the world is coated in a light dust, as always, and the courtyard glows faintly under the last stars of night. Today, you have no fixed duty, no errand from your mother or invitation from a neighbor, only the open day. And that itself is a kind of responsibility. You decide to tend to the roof, which has gathered debris and dry leaves blown in by days of wind. Climbing the narrow steps that curve along the side of the house, you carry a basket and a short broom made from palm fibers tied tightly with string. The roof greets you with warmth, still clinging to the previous day's sun. You begin sweeping, slowly, pushing the dust toward the edge, where it can fall harmlessly to the alley below. You pause often, not from fatigue, but from the simple habit of noticing a clay tile that has cracked slightly, a bird's feather caught beneath a rock, the tiny spiral shell of a long-dead beetle tucked into the corner where two walls meet. Across the rooftops, other villagers are also beginning their day. A boy tosses water over his family's courtyard to settle the dust. A woman shakes out a rug patterned in faded blues and reds. Someone hums an old tune, familiar, wordless, comforting, as the sun crests the horizon. Light spills over everything in gold and pale rose. The warmth is gentle at first, seeping into the stones, lifting the edge of your robe, brushing your skin with a softness that hides the dryness beneath it. You finish the roof work by mid-morning and descend again, your hands gritty, your sandals dusty. You wash at the basin, letting the water trickle slowly between your fingers, watching how it beads on your skin before disappearing into the thirsty ground. Your sister is baking small rounds of bread near the hearth, turning them with flat wooden sticks and humming to herself between each flip. She hands you one without speaking, and you eat it warm, the crust crisp, and the inside slightly sweet from the last of the season's grain. Later, you walk toward the northern fields, dry, of course, as they always are, but still worth checking for signs of anything. The path there is lined with old stones that have tumbled over centuries, the markers of ancient boundaries and forgotten gardens. You stop at a spot where once there was a well, now sealed and unused, its stones sunken and overgrown with thorny brush. You sit beside it, brushing sand from a flat rock, and close your eyes. There is no breeze here, only the sound of your own breathing and the faint creak of a branch swaying nearby. You think about nothing for a while, and that too feels like work, letting your mind become as still as the sky above, which remains impossibly, beautifully blank. On your return, the village is beginning to turn toward evening. You pass a group of children chasing each other with palm leaves, shrieking and laughing before they vanish around a corner. You nod at your neighbor, who sits repairing the strap of a sandal, his fingers moving with quiet skill. The shadows grow longer, stretching toward each other like tired arms across the dirt paths. At home, your mother is cooking a stew with lentils and fermented greens. The smell pungent, but oddly appetizing. You help her stir, adjusting the fire with dry twigs, and ladle the food into bowls as the others gather. Dinner is quiet, as always. A slow meal of shared glances, small bites, and occasional nods. Afterward, you carry a jug to refill at the village basin, passing the fig tree that still hasn't fruited, but offers shade just the same. You sit beneath it for a while, watching the last glow of sun fade from the walls, watching as one by one the stars take their places in the sky. You trace familiar constellations: hunter, jugbearer, serpent, and think about the stories behind them, stories told in this village for longer than anyone remembers. The fig leaves flutter slightly in the cooling air, and you pull your shawl tighter around your shoulders. The wind carries no scent of rain, no whisper of change, but the night feels whole in its own way. You return inside and lie on your mat, eyes half open, listening to the crackle of the last coals in the hearth and the soft murmur of your family settling around you. And as your body softens and your breathing slows, sleep comes like a slow exhale, not because you've asked for it, not because anything is different, but because even in sameness there is rest. The day fades, the night deepens, and once again you're carried gently into that vast, quiet space where time forgets to pass and dreams arrive like footsteps on sand, leaving no mark at all. The 31st day begins with a sky so pale it almost seems white, as if the blue has been worn thin from too many cloudless mornings. You awaken slowly, your eyes adjusting to the brightness, already slipping through the wooden slats in the ceiling, soft and diffuse. There's no urgency to your movement. You rise with the practiced ease of someone whose days are shaped not by clocks or commands, but by light, warmth, and the gentle weight of routine. The mat beneath you creaks as you roll it up, and your fingers briefly trace the patterns in the weave, a habit born from years of use. Outside, the courtyard holds a coolness that won't last, and the shadows cast by the fig tree form jagged shapes across the stone. Your mother is preparing a simple breakfast: barley bread and date paste, which she wraps in cloth and places in a low basket for you to take with you. Today, you're meant to accompany your uncle to the edge of the wadi, a dry riverbed that only remembers water in rare years, to help patch the stone lining of the catchment basin, a wide, shallow depression built long ago to hold runoff in the unlikely event of a storm. You sling the basket over your shoulder, greet the goats with a quiet whistle as you pass their pen, and make your way out of the village with your uncle, whose walking stick taps against the path in an unchanging rhythm. The wadi lies just beyond the low ridge that rises east of the date grove, its wide mouth stretching between rocky banks that seem as if they were carved by some long-vanished hand. The sun climbs slowly, and you feel it pressing gently on your back as you descend the slope, your sandals slipping now and then on loose gravel. At the basin, you set to work with simple tools: buckets of mud mixed with straw, flat stones, and your own hands. You and your uncle work in silence, fitting each stone like a puzzle piece into the curved wall of the catchment, reinforcing places where time and wind have worn away the original strength. The mud dries quickly under the heat, but you press it into place carefully, smoothing each section with your palm. Occasionally, your uncle points to a particular crack or gestures toward a shifting stone, and you respond with a nod. There is no need for words. The task is slow, absorbing, and quietly fulfilling. When the sun reaches its highest point, you both sit in the narrow strip of shade beneath a ledge, sharing the simple meal your mother prepared. The bread is dense but sweet, and the date paste clings pleasantly to your teeth. You chew slowly, watching a single hawk circle high above in the sky, its wings barely moving. The silence here feels different from the village, a deeper kind of stillness, broken only by the distant rustle of dry reeds and the faint scrape of pebbles shifting under your feet. After resting, you return to the work, your hands growing dry and cracked from the mud, your arms sore from the weight of stone, and yet there is peace in the repetition. You finish just before evening, stepping back to look at the restored curve of the basin, knowing it may never fill, but also knowing it must be ready. That, too, is part of the rhythm. The walk home is slower, the sky beginning to blush with the colors of evening, muted oranges and dusty pinks blending into the edges of the hills. You and your uncle do not speak. His walking stick still taps the earth in steady intervals, a beat that seems to blend with your breath. When the village comes into view, it feels both unchanged and new, as if the day away has reset your eyes. Smoke curls from the hearths, and children laugh as they race one another through the narrow lanes. You return home and wash the mud from your arms, watching it swirl down the basin like pale paint, disappearing into the earth. Your mother greets you with a smile as she stirs a pot of chickpea stew, and your brother hands you a small bowl of pickled turnip. You eat slowly, savoring the tang and salt after the long warm day. Later, you sit near the hearth, letting the last of the fire warm your feet as your grandmother tells a quiet story to the youngest children about a time when the basin once filled in a single night, and people danced barefoot in the mud until morning. You don't interrupt, though you've heard it before. You simply listen to her voice, soft and steady, like the wind brushing through old reeds. When the story ends, and the children drift toward sleep, you step outside once more. The stars are already awake, blinking silently above, and you settle onto your mat in the courtyard with the ease of someone who knows they belong to the night as much as to the day. You feel the stillness press in around you, not heavy, but familiar, a quiet reminder that not all things must move to have meaning. You breathe deeply, eyes fixed on the sky, and let the slow hum of the earth carry you into sleep once more, like a stone resting in the curve of the basin, ready, waiting, and at peace. The 32nd day unfolds beneath a morning sky so pale it almost blends with the dust that hangs gently in the air, as if the light itself has grown tired of waiting. You wake slowly, the kind of waking that feels like drifting to the surface rather than rising, and you lie still for a while, listening to the world. Before opening your eyes, there is the quiet shift of your mother's footsteps on the stone floor, the faint clink of pottery, and the soft breath of the wind as it curls past the edge of the open doorway. When you sit up, your body aches in the familiar, even comforting way that comes from a life spent in motion. Not fast or hurried, but constant. Today, your task is to visit the elder on the far edge of the village, a woman known for her stories and her skill with knots. She's been weaving nets again, old, hands still steady, and your mother says she needs help stretching the cords for curing in the sun. You eat a warm bowl of wheat mash and drink the herbal water that's been steeping overnight with dried lemongrass and caraway before setting out. The streets are quiet, only a few voices murmuring behind doorways, and a boy squats near a puddle, likely from spilled wash water. Poking it with a stick and watching the rings spread, you smile slightly and keep walking, the path taking you past the goat pens and the olive press, which stands unused in these dry months. Its stone wheel, covered with a faded cloth to keep the dust off. When you reach the elder's home, she is already seated in the shade of her awning, her long fingers twisting lengths of fiber into tight coils, the beginnings of a new net curled at her feet like a sleeping animal. She greets you with a glance, then gestures toward the poles she's planted in the ground. Simple wooden stakes set at regular intervals, ready to receive the woven cords. You kneel beside her and begin tying the fibers from one pole to the next, your fingers learning the rhythm. Twist, pull, loop, tighten. The fibers are coarse and resist your grip, but the motion becomes easier with repetition. As you work, she begins to speak, not directly to you, but aloud, her voice low and steady, recounting a tale of a trader who once brought a stone so smooth and blue it looked like frozen water, and how it was lost in a flood that came without warning. You've heard the story before, though she never tells it the same way twice. Her voice becomes the soundscape of your morning, rising and falling like wind through tall grass. Occasionally, you pause to adjust the net's tension or to sip water from the shared gourd, its clay surface cool against your palm. The sun climbs higher, and shadows shrink around you, the heat pressing gently on your back as you move to the next section. By midday, the net is fully stretched, and the elder nods in quiet approval, her eyes squinting against the light. She offers you a piece of flatbread and a smear of fig paste, which you eat in silence while watching the cords sway lightly in the breeze, not enough to pull, just enough to remind you that the air is always moving, even when you can't feel it. On your way home, you take the longer path through the date grove. The trees are tall and quiet, their fronds rustling with dry whispers, and the ground beneath is soft with fallen leaves. A few unripe fruits cling to the higher branches, too early to pick, but promising sweetness in months to come. You pause beneath the tallest tree and look up, letting the dappled light fall across your face. For a moment, you think you hear something like a deep, far-off rumble, but it fades as quickly as it came, and the silence returns. You smile at yourself, at your own hopefulness, and walk on. When you arrive back at the village, the evening is beginning to stretch its fingers. Across the rooftops, your mother is stirring a pot of soup with lentils and preserved lemon peel, and your brother is carving small patterns into a piece of wood for no reason other than to pass the time. You wash your hands and face, the cool water bringing a brief freshness to your sun-warmed skin, and sit to help with the chopping. Dinner is served just as the first star appears, a silent announcement that the day is ending. You eat slowly, chewing each bite as if trying to make it last a little longer, and listen to the quiet voices of your family mixing with the occasional bark of a dog or the clatter of a pot lid. Later, You carry a folded blanket to your favorite spot near the corner of the courtyard wall, where the wind gathers in soft spirals and the stars are easiest to see. You lie back, letting the stones press gently into your spine, and watch the sky shift into its darker self. No clouds still, just stars. But in this stillness, there is no disappointment, only patience that has been woven into every gesture, every stone, every breath of wind. Your eyes grow heavy, your limbs relax, and sleep takes you slowly, like the unraveling of a tightly bound cord, releasing you into the wide, quiet night without sound or promise, only peace. The 33rd day begins before you fully realize it has, as if the night simply softened into light rather than ended. The cool air clings a little longer than usual, brushing against your skin like a memory of water. And for a moment, as you lie with your eyes still closed, it feels as though the weather might change. But you know better. Still, you hold that thought quietly as you rise, folding your shawl and setting your mat aside. The courtyard greets you in muted tones, the stone still dark from the night, the fig tree casting a gentle lattice of shadow across the floor. Your father is already seated by the low bench, using a curved blade to peel bark from a dried branch, collecting the shavings in a clay bowl to later use in the fire pit. He doesn't speak, only nods, his fingers steady with the ease of long habit. Today, you have decided on your own task, a small repair to the irrigation ditches carved into the hard earth outside the eastern wall of the village. Though they carry no water now and haven't for seasons, they must still be tended. This is the way things are done. You do not neglect what may one day be needed. You gather a bundle of reed stalks, a basket of small stones, and a flat tool worn smooth at the handle, and begin the walk through the quiet morning. The sun is still gentle, its warmth pleasant rather than harsh, and the path is familiar beneath your feet. Along the way, you pass the olive press, the silent kilns, and the prayer stones stacked at the edge of the path, where someone has left a small offering, perhaps a date, or a feather, or a fragment of dyed cloth, barely visible beneath the dust. At the ditch, the earth has crumbled in places, the walls weakened by time and footsteps. You kneel and begin the work slowly, pressing reed bundles into the soft edges, reinforcing them with layers of small stones, and tamping everything down with the flat of your palm. Your fingers grow coated in dry silt, and the sunlight creeps across your back. But you work without rush, losing yourself in the repetition. Occasionally, a bird passes overhead, a shadow flitting across the ditch, or a cricket chirps near your elbow. The only voices in an otherwise silent morning. By midday, your back aches, and you rest beneath a nearby mesquite, chewing a piece of dried apricot and sipping the cool water you carried with you in a goatskin pouch. The air is still, almost heavy, but without menace. The landscape seems to hum quietly, as though in agreement with your slow labor. In the afternoon, you make your way back toward the village, your basket lighter now, your task complete. The paths are more lively now, children chasing a rolling pot lid, a man leading a mule with bundles of dried herbs tied to its back, two women exchanging handfuls of ground spice in small folded cloths. You nod at them all, saying little, and Return home with the calm weight of a day spent shaping something unseen. Your mother welcomes you with a slice of flatbread dipped in vinegar and oil, and you eat slowly while sitting on the cool floor beside the hearth. The fire is low, the coals a soft orange glow that flickers against the walls. You help prepare the evening meal, crushing lentils with a stone and mixing them with ground cumin, then forming small cakes to fry on the wide, flat pan. The scent is sharp and earthy, and it fills the space with comfort. As the sun begins to lower, casting the village in its usual gold and rose hues, you climb to the roof to check the jars stored there, some used for pickling, others for catching dew. Even though they remain mostly dry, you wipe the dust from their lids and rearrange them for balance, then sit beside them as the stars begin to appear, one at a time, like old friends returning from long walks. Below, laughter rises from a courtyard where someone tells a story, the details lost to distance, but the rhythm unmistakable. You breathe in slowly, the night air dry and faintly scented with smoke and stone, and let the quiet settle around you. When you return to your mat, it is still warm from the day. You lie down with your arms behind your head, watching the sky turn deeper shades of blue and violet. The stars are unwavering in their brightness, offering no answers, no promises, only presence. And you too feel like part of that presence, a small, breathing thing held in place by the slow turning of time. Sleep doesn't surprise you tonight. It simply arrives, folding over you like a second blanket, carrying you into its steady, wordless rhythm. The day, like the ditch, is repaired. The village breathes. The sky holds steady, and once again, the rain does not come, but the peace, the ritual, the stillness, they are more than enough. The 34th day comes with no warning, no sudden gust or call of birds, only the subtle shift in light as morning peels gently away from night, brushing against the edges of the village like a story being whispered into half-asleep ears. You open your eyes to the same ceiling, the same woven mat beneath you, the same quiet promise of repetition that somehow still feels different each time. The air is warm, but carries a softness that suggests the night wasn't harsh. You sit up slowly, feeling the weight of your limbs, the pleasant soreness of days shaped by motion. Outside in the courtyard, your mother is shaking out a cloth woven with narrow stripes of ochre and brown, sending a puff of dust into the air that glows momentarily in the angled light. She hums an old tune, wordless but familiar, and the sound carries across the courtyard stones like a thread tying this day to all the others. Today, she asks you to go to the well-keeper's hut, an old man who watches over the deep well just outside the village perimeter, ensuring the ropes are sound, the cover tight, and the basin swept clear of leaves and wind-blown grit. It is not a task you've done before, but she hands you a small satchel with a cloth of dates, a sliver of goat cheese, and a clay stopper of herbal water, and tells you, with a glance, that she trusts you will do well. The path to the well is long but familiar in a distant way. You've walked parts of it to reach the grazing fields, the kiln yard, the old fig orchard that no longer bears fruit. It winds past crumbling stone markers and narrow ridges where thorn bushes lean like old men bent and brittle, waiting for no one. The sun climbs slowly, casting your shadow ahead of you, long and narrow, like a line pulled taut. When you reach the well-keeper's hut, it stands half sunken into the earth, its reed roof patched with mud and old cloth, a small wind catcher spinning lazily above it. The well-keeper himself emerges with the slowness of someone whose body obeys the rhythm of years, his hands folded behind his back, his eyes pale from long days under the sun. He nods at you, then gestures without a word toward the well. You begin by lifting the covering, an old wood and hide contraption, checking for cracks and mold, brushing sand from its edges. The pulley system is simple but effective. A smooth beam held in place by two forked posts, a tightly wound rope, and a jug with a narrow neck. You lower it once, listening for the splash, then draw it back to test the rope's integrity. Everything feels worn but solid. You help sweep the basin next, collecting dry leaves, twigs, and wind-blown straw into a basket, which you then scatter beyond the fence to keep insects away. The old man watches without comment, sometimes pointing with a knuckle, sometimes nodding. When you do something correctly, his silence isn't cold. It's the silence of someone who knows too much to waste words on what can be shown. At midday, he motions for you to sit beside him beneath the awning. You share your food, offering half the cheese and a few dates, and he chews them with care, nodding once in approval. For a long time, you sit there together, watching the landscape shimmer slightly under the heat. In the distance, a single cloud drifts lazily across the sky. Useless, but beautiful. He tells you, in a voice like dried bark, about the last time the well nearly failed many years ago, when the rope snapped and a boy had to be lowered in by hand to retrieve the fallen jug. You listen, saying little, absorbing the story like water into clay. In the afternoon, he allows you to oil the joints of the pulley, and together you wrap the beam in cloth to protect it from cracking further. When the work is done, he places a hand on your shoulder, just briefly, but with meaning, and returns inside without a word. You walk back slowly, the sun low now, the wind picking up faintly and swirling dust across the path in little spirals. The village meets you like a sigh, soft voices, the scent of food on coals, a girl laughing as she chases a dog, the murmur of someone praying in a low tone near the fig tree. You set down the empty satchel and wash your hands. The cool water, a small joy. Your mother doesn't ask questions. She only hands you a bowl of rice, cooked with lentils and pomegranate peel, the tangy sweetness, a surprise in the otherwise familiar flavor. You eat quietly, then sit beneath the awning near the doorway, where the stars begin to blink above the rooftops, one by one. The wind feels slightly cooler than before, not enough to mean rain, but enough to remind you that change, even if slow, still lives here. You lie on your mat again, arms behind your head, listening to the quiet creak of the wind catcher and the faint call of a night bird echoing across the plain. You close your eyes not with expectation, but with calm, and let sleep find you once again beneath a sky that never hurries, wrapped in the comfort of another day that asked little, offered much, and ended as gently as it began. The 35th day slips into being with the kind of gentle inevitability that only a well-rehearsed world can offer. No fanfare, no alarm, just the slow brightening of sky over rooftops and the gradual warming of air that signals the same old sun returning to the same quiet land. You wake to the scent of bread already baking. Your sister must have started early, and the faint echo of someone pouring water from one clay vessel to another near the hearth. You lie still for a while, listening to the layers of sound that compose the morning. The rustle of birds in the fig tree, the creaking of a window shutter, the low voice of an elder calling to a goat just beyond the courtyard wall. When you rise, the stones beneath your feet are cool, their warmth from the day before already forgotten. After washing and wrapping your shawl, you're told by your mother that today is for gathering resin from the acacia trees near the ridge, a task not often given to you, and one that carries a strange kind of reverence in the village, for the trees are thought to hold both healing and memory. You pack lightly a curved blade, 2 small clay pots with wax-sealed lids, and a piece of soft cloth soaked in olive oil to clean your hands after the sap is collected. You eat flatbread with honey, the sweetness thick on your tongue, and set off before the sun fully crests the horizon. The walk to the ridge is long but peaceful, the path winding through familiar dry brush, past stones that have held their places for generations. The land here seems to remember things. Its silence feels deeper, its colors more deliberate. The acacia trees appear as rough silhouettes against the sky, their crooked branches clawing outward in jagged elegance. You greet the trees silently, as your father once taught you, placing your palm against the bark before choosing where to begin. The blade moves slowly, gently, carving narrow paths in the bark to let the resin bleed out in slow golden beads. It takes time. You sit and wait beside each cut, watching as the sap thickens and glistens in the light, careful not to rush the process. This is not a task of harvest, but of patience. Around you, the air buzzes faintly with insects, and the scent of the resin rises, a sharp, sweet, earthy aroma that lingers in your nose and settles in your clothes. Occasionally, you hear the sound of pebbles shifting as a small lizard darts across the ground, or the wind brushing dry leaves along the path. By midday, your hands are sticky and your pots half full. You stop to drink from your water pouch and eat a single dried fig, your body relaxed but alert. There's something sacred in this solitude, in being alone with trees older than memory, in doing work that cannot be hurried. When your pots are filled, you seal them tightly, wrap them in your cloth, and sit for a while longer beneath the largest tree, staring up through its tangle of thorns at the sky above. It's the same empty sky, soft, blue, quiet, but today it feels closer, as though the trees have lifted it slightly in offering. The return journey feels shorter, though your legs are tired. When you reach the village, the sun is already tilting westward, and shadows stretch across the stone walls in long slants. Children race past you, barefoot, dragging sticks through the dust to make looping patterns that vanish behind them. You pass by the well and see a new jug has been added to the basin, a sign someone else came for water while you were gone. At home, You hand the resin to your mother, who inspects it with a nod of approval, placing the pots carefully beside her jars of oil and dried herbs. She hands you a bowl of stew made from rice, cumin, and mashed lentils. The taste warm and comforting, familiar in the way only daily meals can be. You eat slowly on the roof, letting the breeze touch your face, watching as a line of smoke rises from the far side of the village, where someone is baking. As night comes, the stars appear one by one, unhurried, unchanged, and you lie back on your mat with your arms behind your head, your muscles still carrying the rhythm of the day's movements. You can still smell the acacia resin on your fingers. There's no rain, no clouds, not even a hint of wind. But the silence feels fuller somehow, as if it's holding a secret you no longer need to know. And so, you close your eyes beneath that wide, blank sky and slip into sleep like a drop of resin finding its way down bark, slow, steady, and completely at peace. The 36th day enters with the hush of fabric brushing against stone, the subtle shifting of shadows across the courtyard, floor, and the first faint notes of a dove calling from somewhere above the fig tree, so soft you might not have heard it had you not been awake already, staring at the ceiling with eyes that blink more from thought than sleep. There is no surprise in the stillness, no urgency to the morning, just the usual comfort of repetition unfolding one small task at a time. You rise, roll your mat, and wash your face in the basin where the water has sat cool all night. Your fingertips tingle from the sudden touch of cold, and the moment lingers longer than expected. This day, you are asked to join your cousin in preparing dyes, a job not done often, for the ingredients are rare, and the process requires care and patience. You follow him past the olive press and into a shaded alcove carved along the edge of the village, where flat stones are arranged like a forgotten altar, stained from years of crushed pigments. Clay pots wait there, already filled with ingredients gathered earlier: pomegranate rinds dried to curls, saffron threads clumped like golden straw, indigo cakes wrapped in cloth, and dried hibiscus petals, still holding a faint blush of red. The sun is still low enough to cast gentle light into the alcove, and your cousin, older by only a few seasons, gestures for you to begin grinding the indigo. You take the stone mortar in both hands and begin to press and twist slowly, letting the scent of earth and iron rise. The color begins to bloom between the cracks, darkening your fingertips, leaving traces on your sleeves. The process is slow, hypnotic, each circle of the pestle marking time in a language older than clocks. Beside you, your cousin stirs the pomegranate peels into warm water, the liquid turning golden, then darker, then nearly brown. He adds something bitter-smelling to bind the color, an ash from a plant you can't name, and covers the pot with cloth. The two of you work quietly, only occasionally exchanging glances or nods. The air becomes dense with fragrance, the sweet tang of hibiscus, the dusty heat of saffron, the faint metallic cool of indigo powder. By mid-morning, your arms ache from the grinding, and your robes are speckled with tiny blooms of blue. But you feel content, absorbed entirely by the transformation of these simple things into something that will stain cloth for years to come. A child appears with water and a plate of bread, leaving it near the edge of the alcove, before running off again, bare feet slapping the stone path. You and your cousin eat in silence, tearing the bread in halves, dipping it in olive paste that tastes faintly of lemon. As the sun climbs higher, you begin straining the hibiscus dye through soft cloth, watching the water take on a deep rose hue, like evening light caught in a jar. Each pot is carefully labeled with scratches on the clay, each color noted with a symbol, not a word. These dyes will later be used to mark robes, to decorate door curtains, to paint ceremonial stones. When the final jar is sealed, your cousin leans back and smiles, just a little, more with his eyes than his mouth, and for a few long seconds, the two of you just sit, letting the shadows cool your feet. The rest of the village has grown louder as the afternoon settles in. You hear voices from the fields, the rhythmic thump of a pestle against grain, the low sound of someone singing a tune you half remember. You gather the jars carefully into a cloth sack and carry them back toward the center of the village, where your mother stores such items with her oils and herbs. She thanks you without words, placing the sack gently into a dark, cool space behind the cooking pots. Dinner that night is a stew with bits of dried fish, unfamiliar and slightly sour, but warm and filling. You eat slowly as dusk begins to paint the walls in hues that echo the very dyes you helped create. Gold, rust, soft pink, and the deepening blue of indigo. After the meal, you wash your hands again, the blue still faintly staining your fingernails, and sit near the courtyard wall where the scent of hibiscus still lingers in the folds of your shawl. The stars begin to appear in patterns you know by heart, but you find yourself watching them longer than usual, tracing them with your eyes, as if waiting for them to shift into something new. The wind carries no scent of water, no breath of change, but it feels like enough tonight just to have created color from silence. You lie back, the stones warm beneath you, and let your thoughts drift like dye into cloth, sinking deep, slow, and without resistance. Sleep arrives as it always does, not in a rush, but in quiet steps, wrapping around you like the soft folds of indigo-stained fabric, holding you gently as the night deepens and the sky remains unchanged, faithful in its silence. The 37th day arrives with a light that feels thinner somehow, stretched across the morning like old linen, hanging in a breeze that never comes. You lie awake for a while, listening, not for rain, not anymore, but for the everyday chorus that reassures you the world still turns. The creak of wood underfoot, the scratch of broom bristles over stone, the faint call of a donkey tied just beyond the southern wall. The smell of boiling barley drifts into the courtyard from the hearth, where your sister stirs the pot with a flat wooden spoon, her back to you, her hair still braided from the night before. You sit up slowly, letting your muscles remember how to move, and begin the quiet routines that shape your mornings like soft clay, folding your mat, stretching your shoulders, rinsing your hands in a basin that reflects the pale sky above. Today, you are tasked with helping the tanner, a man whose work sits at the edge of the village, always downwind, where the scent of curing hides can rise freely without offending the neighbors. You're not thrilled. No one is, really. But it is necessary work, and in this village, necessity holds more weight than preference. After a small meal of warm barley mash, sweetened with date syrup, you make your way along the dusty lane, past low walls, patched with clay and straw, past children playing silently with carved sticks, their laughter restrained by the thick morning air. The tanner greets you with a curt nod and hands you a bundle of hides already soaked in lime water. They are heavy, sour-smelling, and cool to the touch. He shows you where to scrape, using a curved blade made from goat horn and flint, and you set to work beside the shallow pit where the hides are laid across wooden planks. The scraping is rhythmic, almost meditative, once you find your pace, and though the smell is strong, it fades into the background of your senses after a while, overtaken by the focus required to do the job well. You work side by side with the tanner in near silence, occasionally glancing up at each other to nod, to signal a pause, or to hand over a tool. Around midday, you both sit beneath a frayed awning, stretched between two crooked posts, and share a meal. He offers you dried figs and a piece of hard cheese, and you offer him some roasted lentils, wrapped in cloth your mother prepared. Neither of you speaks much. The breeze flutters the edge of the awning, and for a moment you both look up, as if expecting it to carry some message, some shift in the sky. But the wind dies just as quickly as it came. The afternoon brings more work, stretching cleaned hides over wooden frames to dry in the sun, brushing them with oil infused with crushed herbs, and occasionally driving away the flies that hover at the edges like sentries, waiting for permission. Your arms ache from the repetition, and the smell clings to your clothes. But there is something satisfying about seeing the work progress. Raw skin transformed into something useful, enduring. When the last frame is secured and the tanner grunts his approval, you wash your hands and forearms in a basin of ash water, the gray suds swirling away the smell, but not the memory. You walk home slowly, the sun low behind you, casting long, golden lines across the ground. The village feels quieter than usual, the kind of quiet that comes when everyone is too tired to speak, when even the animals seem to tiptoe through the dust. Your mother meets you at the door with a damp cloth to wipe your face, and you can see the faint wrinkle in her nose as she smells the remnants of your day. Still, she smiles and says nothing, setting a bowl of stew in front of you, a mix of lentils, dried squash, and something fermented that leaves a pleasant tang on your tongue. You eat with gratitude, the kind that doesn't need to be spoken. Afterward, you climb to the roof, taking a jug of water with you, and sit beside the old basket of figs that have begun to wrinkle with age. The sky is clean, wide, and empty. No clouds, no movement, just the steady unveiling of stars as night replaces the last of the light. You pour a little water onto the clay tiles, watching it steam and vanish. Small ritual with no purpose other than to feel the contrast between wet and dry. You lie back, the roof still warm beneath you, and let your breath slow to match the hush of the world around you. You don't think of rain anymore. You think of hides turned to leather, of the slow grind of each day's work, of how everything here depends not on what comes, but on what is done. And as your eyes close, your body remembers what it means to rest not from chaos, but from continuity. Sleep takes you gently, like a dry wind folding around your form, holding you still as the stars look down, silent, steady, and utterly unchanged. The 38th day wakes slowly, as if it too is tired from the repetition, the stillness, the endless patience stretched thin across so many cloudless mornings. You open your eyes to a light that is neither bright nor dull, just enough to make the outlines of the courtyard clear, the familiar shadows of the fig tree dancing lazily across the floor where wind moves unseen. The air is thick with the warmth that never truly left from yesterday, and you rise slowly, stretching each limb as if coaxing life into it. Your legs ache slightly from the day before, a dull weight from the scraping and hauling of hides, but the ache feels good, earned, part of the rhythm your body now knows, without needing to be taught. After washing your hands and face at the basin, you step barefoot over to where your mother is preparing the morning dough, her fingers coated in flour, her sleeves pushed back to the elbow. She asks you to accompany your younger brother to the pottery yard today, not to work, but to observe, to watch how the clay is shaped, how the fire is prepared, and how the glazes are mixed from dust and dreams. Your brother is excited, his feet tapping restlessly against the courtyard floor, his eyes wide with the kind of energy you haven't felt in some time. Together, you walk the short path past the grain store and the resting donkeys to where the potters work beneath low canopies stretched with goat hide, their tools arranged in rows like musical instruments waiting to be played. The air here smells of earth and smoke, the cloying scent of wet clay blending with the deeper heat of ash and sun-warmed stone. One of the potters, a thin man with thick forearms and a voice like polished wood, greets you with a nod and hands your brother a small lump of clay, soft and cool to the touch. The boy grins and drops to his knees beside the wheel, ready to shape something without a name. You stand quietly behind them, arms crossed loosely, watching. The potter demonstrates slowly, placing both hands around the clay and guiding it into motion with a foot pedal beneath the wheel. The lump wobbles, resists, then slowly gives way, stretching upward like a stem, flattening, widening, becoming something useful. Your brother tries, his hands unsteady, his creation lopsided, but no one laughs. The potter only smiles and says, "Again," and he does. You spend the morning there, watching the process of form and fire, observing how even the simplest pot is born from stillness and movement, from pressure applied at the right time and patience held in the wrong ones. Nearby, an older woman is grinding glaze pigment from crushed rock and dried berries, her bowl a mosaic of color, red from iron, yellow from ochre, green from ground herbs, each one mixed with water and left to settle. She lets you stir one, and the texture surprises you, thick but smooth, like cooled oil. You ask nothing, but she explains anyway, saying how the pigment must rest overnight before it's painted on, or it will crack in the fire. Everything here, it seems, demands waiting. Around midday, you and your brother sit under a date palm just beyond the kiln, eating slices of dried melon and small cakes made from chickpea flour. The heat of the kiln drifts on the wind, rising in slow waves, distorting the air like a mirage. You close your eyes for a while and listen, not for voices, not for rain, but for the gentle song of things becoming. After lunch, the kiln is lit, and you both watch as the fire grows, fed by bundles of dry reed and thorny wood. The potter explains how the fire must be watched constantly, not too hot, not too weak, just steady. The pots are placed carefully. Inside, their surfaces still damp, their futures undecided. It will take hours, maybe the entire night, before the fire finishes its part. But you won't see that. You return home in the late afternoon, your brother chattering happily about how he will one day make a bowl strong enough to hold the moonlight. You smile, but say nothing, remembering the strange weight of the glazed bowl in your hands, the quiet pressure of stillness being stirred. The village is peaceful in that late hour, the sun slipping lower, the shadows pooling around doorways like old water. Your mother is cooking lentils again, this time with bits of preserved lemon and shaved garlic, the scent pulling you back into the rhythm of home. You eat in silence, save for your brother, who recounts every moment of his day until sleep takes him before the bowl is empty. You help your mother clean the dishes, then climb to the roof to sit with your thoughts. The air finally cool against your skin. The stars appear again, as they always do, faithful in their indifference, and the wind stirs faintly across the courtyard tiles. You lean back, resting your head against the jar that once held last season's figs, now empty but not forgotten. You think of clay and fire, of glazes and pigments, of things transformed not by speed, but by the long patience of heat and stillness. You do not ask for rain, do not wonder if tomorrow will be different. You simply let the night settle over. You let the earth hold your weight and drift into sleep like a pot drying in the dark, quiet, unfinished, waiting. The 39th day begins not with a sound, but with a feeling, the kind of heaviness in the air that makes the curtains hang motionless and the birds delay their morning chatter. You rise before the sun touches the rooftops, drawn by the strange quiet that feels both familiar and uncertain, like remembering a dream you can't fully grasp. The courtyard is still wrapped in shadows. The stones cool beneath your feet as you move slowly through the hush. Your mother, already awake, hands you a folded cloth bundle and tells you, with a soft voice and a hand on your shoulder, that you are to visit your uncle beyond the far grove, where he watches the beehives. The bees, she says, have been restless, and he needs help inspecting the hives before the midday heat drives them into hiding. You nod without questions, slipping a water skin over your shoulder, and begin the long walk out of the village, past the cracked wall near the dry granary, through the narrow pass lined with thorn brush and the skeletal remains of long dead palms. The path is rough in places, the stones sharp and unkind, but you know the rhythm of it by now, and your sandals carry you without complaint. The sun climbs behind you, spilling soft gold across the dust, and soon the scent of wild thyme and honey reaches your nose, faint and teasing, guiding you toward your uncle's hut nestled between two low hills. He is there, crouched near the hives, his hands gloved and his face half wrapped in a mesh of cloth to keep the bees at bay. He greets you with a nod and motions toward the small table nearby where extra veils and gloves have been laid out. You suit up carefully, the fabric stiff and warm, and join him beside the hives, row upon row of clay cylinders tucked into the hillside, each one humming softly, alive with movement. Your task is to check the entrances, clear away any debris, and gently remove a few of the older lids to check the honeycomb. Check the honeycomb. The bees are calm today. They're buzzing low and steady, and you find yourself mesmerized by their quiet precision. Inside one hive, the comb is heavy and golden, thick with syrup that glistens in the light. You use a small curved blade to scrape away a portion and place it in a clay jar, your hands sticky with sweetness and effort. Occasionally, a bee lands on your arm, and you hold still, watching its tiny legs move across your skin, its wings twitching in rhythm. Your uncle says little, but his presence is grounding, his movements confident, deliberate, shaped by years of patience and stings. You work together through the morning, sweat collecting beneath your veil, arms tingling from the slow repetition of inspection and cleaning. By midday, the jars are half filled, and you both retreat to the narrow shade beneath a rock ledge, where he unwraps a bundle of bread, goat cheese, and dried figs. You share the meal without speaking much, chewing slowly, your mouths busy and your minds quiet. After the meal, he tells you how, once, the bees vanished for a full season, and only the blossoms bloomed without them. The flowers fell untouched, and for months he thought the hives would never hum again. But then, on the first morning of the next planting season, they returned without a sound, as if they'd never left. You ask where they went, and he only shrugs, saying, "Some things return when we stop watching." You sit with that thought for a long time. As the afternoon wears on, you finish sealing the jars with wax, arranging them beneath a shaded shelf inside his hut. You help wash the tools and hang the veils to dry, the wind finally stirring just enough to make them flutter like ghostly shapes against the stone. Before you leave, your uncle presses a small honeycomb into your hand, still warm, still dripping, and tells you to bring it home for your brother, who has a sore throat. You thank him and begin the walk back, the honey wrapped carefully in your shawl. The wind is slightly cooler now, and the sky has begun its slow shift toward the pale orange that signals evening. As you pass the grove, you hear the low rustle of leaves, not from movement, but from the gentle friction of dry branches brushing one another in the breeze. The village appears ahead of you, familiar yet softened by distance, and you feel the day settling onto your shoulders like a gentle weight. When you reach home, your mother receives the honey with a quiet smile, placing it beside her bundle of herbs and whispering a prayer under her breath. You rinse your arms at the basin, the water washing away the scent of bees and sun, and join the family for a meal of flatbread and lentil stew, your body sore but content. As night falls, you climb to the roof with your brother, who curls beside you beneath a worn blanket, his breath slow and steady, the honey already soothing his voice. The stars blink lazily above, and the wind carries the faintest trace of of something sweeter than dust. You lie back, arms beneath your head, and think of the bees, their vanishing, their return, and the way some things wait until we stop needing them to appear. The thought folds into your breath, and soon, without asking, sleep arrives again, soft and slow, as honey dripping from the comb, holding you in its golden stillness. The 40th day begins in the same quiet rhythm that has defined every morning before it, though today there is a subtle difference, not in the weather, not in the sky, but in the way your body stirs, as if the long arc of waiting has grown roots in your muscles, and each stretch, each breath, feels tethered to all the days that came before. You rise slowly, the light in the courtyard already gently golden, filtered through the dust that forever floats on the air like a second skin. Your mother is kneading dough again, her hands moving steadily over the flat stone table, and the scent of yeast and warm flour hangs thickly around her. She tells you there will be guests later. Your mother's cousin and her son are visiting from the eastern road, bringing with them salt cakes and red-spiced olives, which haven't been seen here in months. She asks you to help prepare the guest space in the shade near the back wall, where old cushions must be shaken out and a low table cleaned with citrus water. You set to work, brushing sand from the corners of the mat, beating the cushions with a stick until puffs of dust rise like smoke, and scrubbing the clay tabletop with rags soaked in lemon peel and lavender. The smell is sharp and clean, the kind that wakes you more fully than sleep ever could. As you work, your sister appears carrying a basket of pomegranates from storage, their skins dark and cracked, but still full of juice. She begins slicing them slowly, arranging the gleaming seeds in clay bowls, like rubies spilled across earth, and you realize how rare this brightness is, how precious even color has become. By mid-morning, the guests arrive. Your mother's cousin is wrapped in deep indigo fabric, her eyes rimmed in kohl, her voice warm and round like the edge of a well. Her son is your age, but taller, his arms browned from sun and travel, his words measured but curious. They bring with them a breeze of other places, a trace of a town with running water, stories of copper merchants, and news that a caravan passed through their village with cloth from the far north, dyed in shades they had no names for. You listen quietly, not jealous, not longing, just absorbing the way earth takes in footsteps without shifting. Lunch is prepared slowly and with care. Roasted lentils with coriander and clove, flatbread softened in oil and wrapped around chopped dates and ground walnuts, sweetened goat milk served in shallow cups, painted with faint, flaking designs. The meal is shared beneath the shaded wall, where everyone sits low, cross-legged, speaking between bites in soft, lulling tones. After the meal, you're asked to fetch water from the storage jars, and you carry it in a smooth clay pitcher, careful not to spill as you weave between the lounging figures. Someone begins humming a tune, and soon your sister adds a second voice, the sound weaving through the warm air like a thread of wind. The guest's son asks if you've seen the desert bloom, not in a tale, but with your own eyes, and you tell him no, that here the earth waits, but does not surprise. He smiles gently and says, "Then you haven't seen it yet." The words settle over you like dust, light but present. In the late afternoon, the visitors prepare to leave, their small gifts exchanged, and farewells spoken with the formality that makes parting feel heavier than it should. You walk with them partway down the road, past the date trees where goats often rest in the shade and wave as their figures grow smaller against the sun. On your return, the house feels quieter, emptier, not in sadness, but in the way silence follows music. You help your mother collect the dishes, rinse the cups, and fold the used cloths. The sun has begun to dip low, casting shadows that stretch toward the east, and the air cools just enough to make you breathe a little deeper. For dinner, your father roasts onions over coals, their skin blackening as their scent turns sweet and smoky. You eat with your hands, fingers stained with spice, licking them clean while watching the sky shift slowly into blue. Later, as the stars return to their familiar posts, you sit on the rooftop, a cushion beneath you, the taste of pomegranate still lingering faintly on your tongue. You think of the boy's words, of flowers rising from sand, of rain falling where no one expects it. You don't imagine it happening here. You don't even hope. You simply let the thought exist, quiet and distant, like a cloud that never arrives. The wind stirs your shawl, and the world feels exactly the same. But something in you, tiny, uncertain, has moved. And when sleep comes, it is lighter, like the dream of a guest passing through a town that remembers them long after they've gone. The 41st day begins beneath a sky that is unchanged, yet strangely luminous, as though the dawn is arriving with just a little more softness than usual, its edges blurred by something invisible, something not quite named. You sit up on your mat before the birds begin their calls, listening for the first creak of the windcatcher, the distant bray of the tethered donkey, the soft clatter of a pot lid in the next courtyard. It's quiet still, not heavy, but watchful, like the pause before a storyteller begins the next part of an old tale. Your limbs stretch with the slow grace of familiarity, and you rise into the day like a seedling pushing gently through soil. In the kitchen, your mother is already roasting barley for the morning meal, the scent rich and nutty, mingling with a faint note of fennel she's added today. She gives you a task without turning, a simple one, but one she rarely assigns, to walk to the outer boundary of the village and check the family's boundary markers. The old clay markers are buried halfway in the sand, shaped like small, flat pyramids with symbols etched on their sides. And though no one expects them to move, they must be checked from time to time, like prayers whispered, not for answers but for continuity. You wrap a cloth over your head to block the sun, take a flask of water and a heel of bread wrapped in fig leaves, and begin your slow walk past the houses, the prayer stones, and the lone bench near the fig tree, where an elder always seems to nap, regardless of the time of day. The sun climbs as you walk, but there is a breeze this morning, light and inconsistent, brushing against your robe like fingers skimming the surface of a bowl. You notice the color of the sky, more blue than usual, with a strange clarity that makes even the far mountains seem closer. When you reach the first marker, near the fallen acacia tree, you kneel and brush away the dust, with your sleeve, with your sleeve, revealing the faint family emblem carved into the surface, a crescent moon cradling 3 stars. You check its alignment, noting that it still points true toward the northern ridge. Then move on to the second and third markers, each one resting near a patch of stubborn grass or the broken edge of an ancient well. At the last marker, situated beside a weather-worn boulder shaped like a resting animal, you sit and take your meal. The bread is dry but sweet with fig, and the water is warm but refreshing. As you eat, you stare at the horizon, where the air trembles faintly in the distance, not from heat alone, but something more subtle, like a mirage of memory. You think of stories told by passing travelers about great storms, of riverbeds that ran full in places your feet have never touched, of hills that turned green for a single week before returning to dust. But here, the silence holds, and yet there is something in the air that feels expectant, like breath drawn in but not yet released. You linger longer than needed, fingers tracing the etchings in the marker, then rise and begin the walk home. The path is quiet, but not lonely. A lizard darts across your feet. A hawk circles far above, its cry distant and sharp. And the wind, though still gentle, no longer feels indifferent. It moves with purpose now, stirring up small trails of dust that drift and dance along the path before disappearing again. When you reach the village, you find your mother outside, rinsing lentils in a shallow clay bowl, her sleeves damp, and her eyes squinting slightly against the sun. You report the markers unchanged, and she nods with quiet approval, reaching over to offer you a date soaked in oil and pressed with sesame. You chew slowly, letting the sweetness settle. The rest of the day unfolds with its usual quiet labors, helping your sister carry pottery to the storage alcove, mending a frayed edge of a blanket, sweeping the walkway, where leaves always gather despite the wind. But your mind drifts off into the horizon, to that strange shimmer you saw, and the way the air seemed to lean forward just slightly, as though listening. At dusk, you sit on the rooftop, a folded cushion beneath you, and watch the sky deepen. It fades not into purple, as it often does, but into a cool, hazy blue, touched with streaks of gold. A single cloud appears, just one, long and thin, like a forgotten thread, barely visible. But there, you don't speak of it. You simply watch as it lingers, unmoving, above the horizon where the desert swells into silence. The stars come later, patient as always, and you lie back beneath them, arms crossed behind your head, the cloth of your sleeve still carrying the faint scent of fig leaf and sun-warmed sand. You do not name what you feel. You do not disturb it with hope or doubt. You simply breathe and wait and let the night carry you into sleep the way only long silence can, slowly, steadily, with the faintest promise that perhaps, someday soon, something will change. The 42nd day opens with a peculiar coolness in the air, not enough to signal anything certain, but just enough to make the hairs on your arms rise as you step into the courtyard barefoot, your sandals hanging loosely from one hand. The early light is pale and even, the sort of light that seems to hold its breath, and for a long moment you stand still in it, absorbing the strange stillness that is not silence, but a pause between heartbeats. A soft breeze drifts across the rooftops, barely stirring the tops of the old fig tree, and you notice that the clay pots left out from yesterday still glisten faintly with dew, a rare sight here. Your mother has not yet emerged from the kitchen, and the hearth is quiet, the fire unlit. You decide, without being told, to fetch water from the family's reserve cistern near the rear wall, where the clay jugs sit cool against the stones, their wide mouths covered with linen cloths to keep out dust. As you draw water into a pitcher, the cloth slips slightly, and for a fleeting second, you see your own reflection in the rippling surface, blurred, softened, unfamiliar. Carrying the jug carefully to the kitchen, you prepare a morning bowl of soaked grain and dried plum, sweetened faintly with the last of the honey brought back from your uncle's hives. By the time your mother appears, rubbing her eyes with the edge of her shawl, the meal is ready, and the two of you sit cross-legged on the mat and eat in companionable quiet. She tells you, almost absently, that today you'll help your father with the tools, sharpening, oiling, checking for wear. It's a task you haven't done in some time, one that feels older than it is, passed from hands to hands, like stories or songs. Your father is already outside when you finish, seated beneath the awning where the ground is flat and smooth, a spread of knives, sickles, shears, and wooden handles laid out beside him. He doesn't greet you with words, only a small nod, and you take your seat beside him, lifting a dull blade and a whetstone, beginning the slow, precise motion of bringing back the edge. The scraping sound is steady, hypnotic, each stroke carving away memory as much as metal. Your father works beside you, repairing a cracked handle with new twine, and now and then he mutters something, a name of a plant, a note about a blade's curve, a reminder to oil the joints once the dust is off. These small instructions become the language between you, and as the morning slides quietly into noon, the sun remains softened behind a pale veil of cloud, not quite thick enough to call shade, but enough to temper the heat. When your arms begin to tire, your father passes you a cloth and a skin of water, and the two of you rest against the wall, watching the shadows that do not quite sharpen. He tells you about his first blade, how it was borrowed from his own father and lost in a storm that swept through the wadi when he was just a little older than you are now. It wasn't the loss that mattered, he says after a pause. It was that I hadn't yet earned the right to carry it. You say nothing, letting the weight of the words settle between you. After resting, you clean the tools one by one, wiping the steel with oil and binding the handles in strips of goat hide soaked overnight in vinegar and salt. The scent is strong, but familiar, and the routine is soothing. By the time you finish, the pile has become orderly, useful again, and your father gathers it into a reed mat and nods with quiet approval before heading inside. You take a moment alone in the courtyard, washing your hands in cool water and watching the surface settle in the basin. There is still that strange tension in the air. Not discomfort, not pressure, just a sense that something is near. Not rain, not yet, but perhaps the edge of it, the whisper of it hiding behind the folds of the afternoon. Your sister joins you soon after, and together You grind dried coriander and salt to preserve a small batch of olives left in the storage jar since the last market day. The grinding is rough at first, the seeds resisting, but the rhythm comes soon enough, and your arms remember how to move with the pestle's weight. The afternoon passes without much noise, only the occasional clatter of a dropped lid or the soft murmuring of someone preparing thread in the next courtyard. For dinner, your mother stews lentils with caramelized onion, the sweetness of it unusual, and serves it with flatbread brushed lightly with mint oil. You eat on the roof as usual, and this time the wind is cooler, decidedly cooler, and carries with it the dry scent of stone turned by air. There are still no clouds thick enough to mean anything, but they drift in slow sheets across the horizon like cloth hung to dry, pale and wide as the stars blink into place. More hesitant than before, you lie back with your hands behind your head, eyes tracing the unfamiliar pattern of that single veiled cloud curling across the moon. The air smells of something unnameable, almost water, almost earth, almost memory. You do not speak of it. You do not ask. You simply lie still and let yourself imagine the sky, forgetting how to stay dry, just for a moment. And with that quiet imagining, sleep returns again, softer this time, like a cloth laid gently over your shoulders. The 43rd day begins beneath a dome of silence, so complete that you notice it before you even open your eyes, a hush that feels woven into the fabric of the morning itself, as if even the sun is rising more carefully than usual. You sit up slowly, half expecting the stillness to break with some hidden sound, an animal's call, the clatter of a water jug, the creak of a wooden gate, but none comes. The air feels heavier today, not hot exactly, but dense, like breath held in the lungs of the land. You rise and step into the courtyard, where the fig leaves barely tremble, and the shadows lie smooth and unbroken. The usual scent of warm dust and olive oil hangs in the air, but there's something else underneath it, something damp and unfamiliar, like stone that has just begun to remember water. Your sister is already awake, standing quietly beside the hearth, holding a bowl of flour, but not yet pouring it. She glances at you, her eyes wide, but unspeaking, and together you share the kind of moment that requires no words, a mutual noticing of something not yet present, but almost here. Your mother appears a little later, slower than usual, her shawl pulled tightly around her shoulders, though the temperature has not changed. She tells you there is no specific task today. Just keep close. You nod, confused but accepting, and begin to tidy the space, brushing dust from corners and arranging baskets in silent patterns, more to keep your hands busy than out of need. The birds are quieter too, their songs brief and hesitant, as though uncertain whether to greet the day or wait. Around mid-morning, the breeze shifts, no longer wandering lazily across the rooftops, but pressing in from the east, steady and low, carrying with it a scent that stirs something deep in your memory. You pause beside the well, placing your hand on the rim, and look upward. The sky has changed, not dramatically. No storm gathers, no thunder rolls. but the blue is thinner, streaked with veils of something pale and streaky. Not white, not gray, just there. You remember a story your grandmother once told you of a year when the wind changed like this, and the camels refused to rest when the children stood still without being told. And then one night, the air broke open and wept. You never saw such a thing yourself, but today, you believe it might be possible. At midday, your father returns early from the nearby ridge, where he often helps the herders check for jackals, and he carries no tools, no bundles, just his staff, his robe, and a look that says little and yet explains everything. He sits in the shaded alcove and asks for tea, not the usual mint, but the darker kind with dried rose leaves. You prepare it slowly, the scent heady, strange for the middle of the day, but somehow fitting. The whole village seems to feel it now. Conversations are quieter. Movements are deliberate. Children are not sent out to fetch anything. Animals are kept tethered closer. It is not fear, but reverence, a collective pause. You spend the afternoon sitting with your brother beside the courtyard wall, carving simple shapes into dried palm bark while he hums a tune neither of you finishes. Occasionally, you glance at the sky. The clouds, if they can be called that, are now more certain, thicker, casting soft shadows across the rooftops. You don't remember the last time your shadow looked like that. For dinner, your mother prepares a stew with dried apricots and black beans, a combination she reserves for the final nights of long fasts or the arrival of travelers. The flavors are rich and deep, and you eat slowly, letting each spoonful settle, your mouth and mind equally full. Just as the last light of day begins to withdraw, a single drop falls, small, warm, and lost in your hair before you can register it. You look up, nothing follows. But then, a second, and a third. The courtyard, for a long breath, goes utterly still. Then your sister gasps softly. Your mother steps outside with bare feet, her arms open, her head tilted skyward. Your brother laughs, loud and uncontained, and runs in circles. The rain does not pour, it does not roar. It comes in slow, deliberate drops, each one landing with a sound that is both alien and intimate. Like a forgotten language rediscovered in a dream, the ground darkens in patches, the air thickens, and for a moment, the world feels like it is remembering something very old, something you never knew you'd forgotten. You step into the open, letting the drops fall against your face, your arms, your lips. You do not move. You do not speak. You simply receive. The scent rises of earth, clay, and distant flowers that have waited longer than you have. And when night finally blankets the sky, you sleep not on your mat, but right there on the rooftop, damp and smiling, the sound of slow rain marking time like a lullaby made just for you. The 44th day begins with the soft scent of wet dust rising gently into the dawn, a fragrance so rare in this part of the world that it feels more imagined than real, like something out of a dream you forgot to wake from. You stir slowly, your blanket slightly damp from where the rain kissed it during the night, and you lie still for a moment beneath the fading stars. listening to the delicate music, leftover droplets tapping the clay rooftop, as if nature hasn't quite finished its lullaby. The air is cooler than it has been in months. Not cold, but sweetly chilled, wrapping around your body like a soft shawl woven from memory and mist. Somewhere below, the sound of gentle sweeping echoes through the village as someone clears away the petals and debris blown loose by the night's quiet weather. You sit up, noticing how the fig leaves gleam with a thin coat of moisture, each one catching the first traces of golden sunlight in tiny mirrors of light. The sky is soft, still gray-blue, streaked with long strips of fading cloud, and the rooftops glisten faintly as if the village has been polished during your sleep. You rise and stretch, the ache in your shoulders from the day before made better by the coolness in the air, and descend to the courtyard where your mother is already awake, humming a song you haven't heard in years. She smiles when she sees you and points to the corner of the yard where a small puddle remains, a rare thing, shimmering like a forgotten jewel. Leave it, she says quietly. Let it disappear on its own. Breakfast today is different, made with reverence, warm barley cakes soaked in honey, topped with dried pomegranate seeds, and a dollop of soft goat cheese. The food tastes brighter somehow, like the sky has seasoned it with its blessing. As you eat, you can hear neighbors speaking softly over the walls, their voices low and affectionate, as though no one dares raise the volume too high for fear of waking the sky and breaking the spell. After breakfast, your father calls you to help inspect the garden, though there is little there but dust-hardened herbs and a few surviving onion stalks. Today he walks among them, with hands behind his back as if touring a king's orchard. He squats beside the basil bush, touches the soil, and looks up at you with quiet wonder. Still dry beneath, he says, but his tone carries no disappointment. It will take time, but it begins here. You nod and help him clear away the old mulch and wind-blown bits of cracked reed that had gathered near the edges of the planting bed. As the morning passes, you notice more children playing outside, their laughter cautious at first, then rising as they discover small patches of mud where dry sand once ruled. A group of girls gathers near the well to catch droplets falling one by one from a bent gutter, letting the water trickle over their fingers like coins from a generous hand. In the afternoon, you help your sister polish the household's storage jars, brushing away dust and wiping them with rags dampened in rose water. She decorates the edges with simple painted lines, saying, "If water is to visit, let it find beauty waiting." You say nothing but nod, her words falling into the quiet spaces of your mind like seeds into soil. Your cousin visits later, bringing dates wrapped in fig leaves and 3 small lemons from a tree in a higher village where the rain was heavier. He speaks excitedly of puddles that lasted into the morning and of sheep that ran to the hills as if summoned by instinct. He claims he smelled grass, real grass, growing near the base of the southern ridge. And though your father raises an eyebrow, no one laughs. This is not a day for doubt. Dinner that night is made over an open flame, with flatbread toasted until golden and dipped in fresh thickened yogurt, and lentils cooked longer than usual so that their softness matches the mood of the evening. The air is cooler still now, and the wind has returned. Not dry, not stinging, but playful, tugging gently at the ends of shawls and whistling through narrow alleys. After the meal, you climb again to the rooftop, this time bringing a second blanket, and lie there alone as the sky deepens from blue to velvet. There are more clouds tonight, high, delicate ones, strung together like beads, and behind them, the moon flickers in and out like a secret being shared. You listen to the village breathe, to the distant soft bleat of a goat, to the creaking of a palm frond in the wind, and for the first time, in as long as you can remember, the waiting feels lighter, not because the rain has come fully, not because everything has changed, but because you now know change is possible. You close your eyes slowly, your chest rising and falling, in rhythm with the breeze, and drift into sleep, not with longing, but with calm, a calm shaped by raindrops, by quiet, by the gentle miracle of a puddle left untouched. The 45th day emerges with a tenderness unlike any before it, as though the village itself has exhaled overnight, and everything now lies softer, lighter, more forgiving. You wake to the faintest drip of leftover rain slipping from the thatch of the rooftop, each droplet falling with a quiet rhythm onto the clay below, like the ticking of an ancient clock that had paused and started again. The sky is a muted canvas of pale grays and cool blues, with threads of gold just beginning to stretch across the edges of dawn. And as you sit up, your blanket still damp at the hem, you feel a kind of weightlessness in your chest, a release not from hardship, but from the holding of breath that has gone on too long. The courtyard is still quiet, though not in the anxious way it had been. This silence is gentle, sleepy, even content. Your mother is already outside, kneeling beside the water basin, using her hands to stir the shallow puddle left behind from last night's small blessing. And the ripples catch the rising sun in wobbly golden rings. She glances over her shoulder at you, says nothing, but her eyes crinkle at the corners in a smile so small it feels like a secret. You prepare a simple breakfast, warm milk with crushed almonds, a handful of olives, and leftover lentil mash pressed into cakes, and eat slowly on the low bench, the air brushing against your skin with the kind of softness usually reserved for dreams. Your father emerges not long after, his robe loosely belted, eyes scanning the sky, not in worry, but with quiet observation, the way one might watch a sleeping child to make sure they are still breathing. He announces that today, the village will clean the runoff channels, the long, shallow grooves that wind between homes and courtyards, designed to capture the rare but precious flow of rainwater when it comes more generously. The channels haven't been touched in months, maybe longer, and weeds have crept in along their edges like small, hopeful invaders. You gather tools, a short-handled hoe, a clay scoop, and a flat pan for carrying away debris, and join a group of neighbors already gathered near the main path. No one speaks much, but the atmosphere is warm with shared purpose, with a hum of energy that feels sacred and ancient. You work for hours, scraping, scooping, brushing aside the dry husks of old weeds, clearing out compacted dirt and stray stones. The sun climbs slowly behind the gauzy veil of clouds, never scorching, only watching. Children dart between workers, carrying messages or cups of water, while elders rest in the shade and offer quiet instructions. Occasionally, someone hums a tune and others pick it up, wordless but familiar, a sound passed down through generations of similar days. By midday, the channels are clear, and small bowls of salted grain and dates are passed around in thanks. You sit on the edge of a newly cleared groove, legs dangling inside it, and chew your food slowly, the muscles in your arms pleasantly sore, the skin beneath your nails still dusted with clay. Across from you, your friend scrawls patterns in the dirt with a stick, circles, spirals, the outlines of a camel's hoof, each one disappearing as soon as it's made. You both laugh when he tries to draw a cloud, and it crumbles before he can finish. In the afternoon, your family gathers in the shade of the courtyard, your mother weaving thin strips of dyed palm frond into a basket, your sister pounding dried herbs for medicine, and your father sharpening the copper tips of a broken rake. You are tasked with organizing the clay pots used to collect runoff, checking them for cracks, tapping them gently with a wooden stick to test their soundness. One breaks in your hand, the bottom giving way in a clean circle, and though the loss is small, you feel it, because everything here is earned slowly. You set the broken piece aside, not to discard, but to repurpose later, as a dish for seed or ash. Dinner that night is made outdoors, beneath a sky that has begun to open again. Lentil stew enriched with onion, cumin, and thin slices of preserved lemon, served with bread toasted over open coals. The smell drifts over rooftops, and you hear neighbors call to each other, commenting on the scent, trading laughter and advice. You eat beside your brother, who holds his spoon clumsily and lets stew run down his wrist. And when you wipe it with the edge of your own sleeve, he leans against you, warm and wordless. Later, as dusk deepens and the first stars blink into view, you climb the roof again, this time bringing a small bundle of broken branches to burn. You light a small fire in the clay bowl at the edge of the roof, and its scent, juniper and myrrh, curls into the air like memory given form. The smoke rises slowly, disappearing into the night, and you sit beside it, watching as the village lights dim one by one. The stars are faint tonight, muted by the veil of lingering cloud, but you don't mind. You sit still, legs crossed, arms around your knees, and listen to the faint sound of water dripping somewhere below, a single drop at a time, falling into a basin already half evaporated, but not empty. And when you lie down, cheek resting against the warm stone, you carry with you a quiet knowing that change, like rain, comes slowly, unevenly, and not always when you need it most, but that it does come, and that, for now, is enough. The 46th day opens with a breeze unlike any you've felt in weeks, cool, sure-footed, and carrying the faint scent of something far off and green, though you know no such fields lie anywhere near. It brushes through the narrow alleys of the village like a welcome guest, stirring laundry left to dry, fluttering the ends of woven mats, and making the fig leaves whisper in voices soft enough to feel sacred. You rise just before the call of the first dove, the sky still a deep blue, slowly being diluted by the pinks and grays of dawn. As your feet touch the ground, still cool from the night, you notice how easily your limbs move today, as though your body, like the earth beneath it, has been softened by the gentle shift in weather. You head to the courtyard, where your mother has already begun boiling water over the hearth, her shawl pulled close, not from cold, but from habit. She hands you a small clay pot of dried herbs, thyme, rose petals, and a pinch of ground cinnamon, and asks you to prepare a cleansing wash to wipe down the home's entryways, a tradition observed only when rain has passed and a new stretch of days is hoped for. You steep the herbs slowly, the steam rising fragrant and steady, curling into the beams above like a prayer released. With a cloth dipped in the warm mixture, you move from doorframe to doorframe, wiping the wood and stone with slow, respectful strokes, as though blessing them for the days ahead. The scent clings to your sleeves, and with every step, you feel a kind of quiet renewal moving through your limbs. Mid-morning brings the task of rebuilding the small water catchers on the rooftop, shallow clay basins carefully arranged to guide even the lightest rain into jars hidden in the shadows. The last shower didn't fill them, but the promise in the sky remains, and preparation is a kind of faith in itself. You fetch the basins from the storehouse, and, with the help of your sister, scrub them clean of dust and old insects using twigs tied together with dried grass. As you work, she sings a tune your grandmother used to hum when grinding grain, and without realizing it, you begin to hum along. It's not a song about rain or weather. It's a lullaby, something about moons and quiet animals. But the rhythm soothes you both, and the work moves swiftly under its spell. Your father joins you later, checking the jars for cracks, tapping them lightly with a finger, and nodding to himself when they ring true. The three of you arrange the system carefully, angling the clay tiles so they will guide water, smoothing out the lip of the jars so the flow will not spill. It's delicate work, requiring more attention than strength. And as you watch a single drop, left from last night, slide perfectly into place, you feel pride bloom quietly inside your chest. By noon, the sun has begun to peek more boldly from behind the last of the morning cloud, but the heat is gentle, tempered by the breeze that continues to pass through the village like a storyteller strolling between houses, dropping memories behind it. You eat lunch on the steps with your mother, pickled carrots, soft bread with cracked sesame, and fresh dates served in a bowl still cool from the shade. She speaks little, but when she does, it is with an ease you haven't heard in days. She tells you a story about her own mother, how she once danced barefoot in a puddle during a rare rain, her hair unbraided and wild, and how the whole village watched and laughed, not with mockery, but with awe. We didn't know how to hold joy in our hands, she says, so we let it dance in our feet. After the meal, you help mend the lattice that shades the pigeon coop, tying fresh reeds along the wooden beams and brushing away the dust that had settled between the slats. The birds coo lazily, their feathers puffed up in comfort, and one of them lands on your wrist for a brief second before flitting off again. In the evening, your father brings out an old rug to shake, and you all help him beat it against the wall, an explosion of dust and memories rising with every strike. The laughter that follows is real and full, even if the sound of it surprises you at first. Later, as dusk settles, the village gathers near the central fire pit for the first time in many days, not for ceremony, not for mourning, but simply to sit. Neighbors bring bowls of roasted chickpeas and dried apricots. Someone plays a flute carved from tamarisk wood. The melody is wandering, uncertain, but beautiful in its imperfection. The older children chase each other around the benches while the elders speak softly about cloud shapes and stories from other valleys. You lie back on the warm stone edge of the fire pit, eyes tracing the movement of stars just beginning to claim the sky. Above, thin clouds move like breath, barely there, but present. You feel full, not from food, but from something slower, deeper, something earned across quiet days and long silences. And as you return to your rooftop bed, wrapping yourself in the blanket that now smells faintly of herbs and sun, you feel your eyelids grow heavy, not with exhaustion, but with peace. The village is quiet, the air sweet, the sky vast, and the waiting at last no longer feels like absence. It feels like readiness. The 47th day begins with the low rustle of movement in the village, before the sun has even breached the horizon. A kind of collective stirring that feels as natural as the tides and just as ancient. You rise without being called, your body already tuned to the rhythms of these long, slow days, and step into a courtyard blanketed in the delicate gray light of pre-dawn. The sky above holds a softness that speaks of dew, though the ground remains dry, and a single thin cloud stretches across the heavens like a line drawn by an unhurried hand. There is no breeze yet, no bird song, only the gentle hush of people waking, of pots being lifted, cloths shaken out, and doors creaking softly on their hinges. Your mother is kneeling near the hearth, crushing roasted chickpeas into a powder for breakfast, her movements steady and slow, as though she too feels the need not to rush anything on a day like this. She glances up at you, gives a tired but kind nod, and says, "Help your uncle today. He's binding the irrigation ropes again." You nod in return, eating a quiet meal of softened grain and dried melon before wrapping your shawl and stepping out toward your uncle's plot, which lies on the far edge of the village, beyond the last row of clustered homes. The path takes you past low stone walls marked with handprints, past the date palms that always lean a little more after each dry season, and past the circle of prayer stones where someone has left a fresh sprig of basil wrapped in twine. Your uncle is already at work when you arrive, crouched near a half-dismantled pulley system, spools of thick palm rope coiled beside him like sleeping snakes. Without words, he gestures for you to hold one end while he tightens the length, checking for frays, testing the tension. The system, old and patched in many places, is what feeds the family's small patch of land when rain is enough to collect in the cistern. Rare, but precious. You've helped repair it before, but today feels different. Not rushed, not desperate, just deliberate, hopeful. The ropes creak beneath your hands, the fibers rough and dry, and as you tie knots, where the wear is greatest, your fingers become stained with the reddish dust of the courtyard floor. Your uncle hums to himself as he works, some rhythm older than memory, and you fall into his pace without question. Occasionally, he pauses to sip water from a goatskin pouch or to brush sand from the winch gears, and you use those moments to glance upward at the clouds still hanging like veils in the east, slowly thickening but making no promises. By midday, the ropes are secured, the pulleys turning more smoothly than before, and you share a lunch of pickled lemon, bread dipped in date syrup, and a handful of salted nuts. He doesn't say much, but when he pats your shoulder after the meal, the meaning is clear. Well done, well enough. You return home slowly, your body tired but not worn, the sun still mild thanks to the thin cloud cover that lingers like a shy guest. In the village, the mood remains peaceful. Children play with sticks and pebbles, drawing rivers in the dust. Your sister braids her hair with dried flowers collected from the shadow of the fig tree. Your mother is sewing a new cover for the grain jar. Her stitch is small and even, and she smiles when you return, offering you a fig that's been soaking in honey since morning. It melts on your tongue, soft and sweet, like the way this day has unfolded. In the late afternoon, you help your father patch a leak in the roof tiles above the back wall. Together, you lift and shift the curved slabs of clay, scraping away the softened mortar and mixing a fresh batch using ash, sand, and oil. The air smells of sun-warmed stone and pressed olives, and from the rooftop, you can see out to the far ridges, where a line of darker cloud now begins to gather, still distant, still slow, but unmistakable in its presence. It's too early to say, your father mutters, but his hands move faster now, and when he finishes the work, he sits for a long moment just staring at the skies. That evening, dinner is simple: lentils, onions, and flatbread toasted directly on the fire, served on palm leaf mats, with warm water infused with fennel and mint. You eat beneath the awning, legs folded, eyes half on your bowl. Half on the way, the air feels heavier now, not thick, not heavy with heat, but with a sense of pause, of breath held. The goats bleat quietly as they are led into their pens. The pigeons coo softly from their roosts, and somewhere a child is singing off-key but happily. As night falls, the stars arrive slowly, blinking through the fading cloud cover one by one, like cautious travelers peeking from behind curtains. You return to the roof again, this time bringing a woven mat and the old leather journal your grandfather once wrote in. Though many pages remain blank, you trace the lines of his faded script, not reading the words so much as feeling them through the movement of your fingertip. Above you, the clouds continue their slow dance across the heavens, more now than earlier, and when the wind picks up, it brings a scent that raises every small hair on your arms: earth, sky, and the edge of something vast. You close the journal, lie back against the warm stone, and feel your breath steady into the rhythm of waiting. Not the old waiting of despair, but the new kind, patient, full of quiet trust. Sleep comes without struggle, as natural as dusk itself, and as you drift off, the wind speaks softly through the fig leaves, and far off, In the darkness, a single droplet falls. You do not hear it, but the earth does. The 48th day begins with a heaviness in the air, so distinct it wakes you before the light touches the sky, as though the very atmosphere has thickened with intention, pressing gently on your chest, making each breath feel like a small conversation with the world around you. You lie still for several moments beneath your woven blanket, listening, not for voices or footsteps, but for something subtler, older, the sound of water dreaming its way back into the land. The air smells different today, not just dust and clay, but the unmistakable scent of distant moisture, wet stone, old bark, a sweetness you've only ever associated with memories your elders used to share about the years when storms arrived in clusters. As you step into the courtyard, the sky is still a deep violet, not yet light, but already pregnant with shadowy clouds that spread like ink across the horizon. There's a silence in the village this morning, but it's not still. It's brimming. Even the goats stir less, their movements cautious, their eyes wide, as if they too sense the tension strung through the air like a bowstring drawn taut. Your mother is already awake, kneeling near the hearth with a bundle of wet herbs steaming on a flat stone, and she doesn't greet you with words. Instead, she simply points to the sky, and you both stand together in the doorway, watching the clouds move, not quickly, not with anger, but with purpose. Breakfast is eaten quietly. Boiled lentils, figs soaked in vinegar, and flatbread grilled to a crisp on last night's coals. You chew slowly, listening to the steady heartbeat of the day gathering somewhere above the clouds. After the meal, your father gathers the family to check the runoff channels once more, not with the idle hope of the past, but with a calm assurance that today they may finally be called upon. You join him, following the narrow paths between homes where shallow ditches wind like veins, guiding water from rooftops to shared collection pits. The village is more active than usual, neighbors speaking softly, bundles being moved indoors, goats tethered more securely. A boy runs past carrying an empty jar half his size, and behind him, a woman stretches a sheet of cloth over her courtyard wall to catch even the lightest fall. There is no panic, only readiness. Everyone moves with the kind of slow certainty that only comes from waiting for something so long that its arrival no longer startles, only settles. You and your father reinforce a low wall beside the family's cistern, packing fresh clay between stones, smoothed by countless hands. The sun, normally scorching by mid-morning, remains hidden behind the clouded veil, and the temperature holds steady, not hot, not cold, but humid, in a way that clings to your robe and makes every breath feel heavy with promise. Your mother prepares jars with lids, bound tightly in cloth, sealing dried goods and setting aside a pot of sweetened almonds and sesame for the children in case the weather turns strong and they must remain indoors. Your sister gathers fresh charcoal and incense, not for worship but for calm, for the scent it gives the home when burned in corners where tension gathers. At midday, the light shifts. The sky darkens more quickly than usual, casting the village in a strange silver hue. Shadows grow sharper, even as the sun is unseen. The first sound comes not as a drop, but as a whisper, wind rushing low over rooftops, stirring the palm fronds into long, shushing waves. The birds take shelter suddenly. A dog howls once and falls silent, and then, from high above, the first drop falls, larger than expected, warm against your cheek. You look up and see nothing but gray, but you feel it. The shift. One drop becomes 2, then 5, then 10. Not a storm yet, no roar, no flood, but rain nonetheless. Soft, steady, alive, the kind that soaks without screaming, that blesses instead of bruising. You and your father step back into the courtyard and let it fall, your sleeves growing darker with each touch of water. Children scream with delight in the distance. Women laugh, deep and free. The sound of clay jars being uncovered echoes like a chant. For the first time in many weeks, the dry basin at the center of the village begins to fill, slowly, modestly, but undeniably. You watch the water gather there, reflect the dull sky above, ripple with each new drop, and you realize that this, too, is history. Not the kind that fills scrolls or earns songs, but the kind that lives in the memory of skin and breath and earth. You spend the rest of the day tending to small tasks indoors, wiping down surfaces, checking for leaks, heating water to brew strong tea with cardamom and clove. Your mother lights the clay lamp earlier than usual, and the home glows gold, while outside the world turns gray. At nightfall, the rain still comes, not heavier, but truer, more rhythmic, more sure of itself. You lie in your rooftop corner, beneath a thick blanket, your mat layered in waxed cloth, and close your eyes to the music of rain on stone, on palm leaf, on clay. It plays like a lullaby, long forgotten but instantly familiar, a tune sung by the sky itself. And as you drift into sleep, your last thought is not of waiting, not of hoping, but of receiving. Not just rain, but rest. The 49th day begins, not with stillness, nor with silence, but with sound. The steady, rhythmic whisper of rain falling on every surface it can find, as though the sky has finally decided to speak after weeks of long, breathless pauses. The entire village has changed overnight. The rooftops glisten, courtyards shimmer with puddles, and the familiar scent of sun-baked dust has been replaced by a deep, earthy aroma that seems to rise from the very bones of the land itself. You wake slowly beneath your blanket, which has grown heavier with the damp air, and blink into the grayish light filtering through the linen draped over the rooftop's edge. It is not a sharp light, nor a warm one, just soft, even, and gray, like the inside of a pearl. There's no urgency in your movements as you sit up, no need for rush. The rain has taken over all the work, soaking, softening, cleansing. You listen as it drums against the storage jars, pings on the copper wash basin, and slides along the stone tiles like fingers tracing forgotten paths. The fig tree in the corner drips steadily, its branches sagging with the weight of water, and the puddle in the center of the courtyard has grown into a small reflecting pool where drops create perfect, endless rings. Your mother doesn't light the hearth today. Instead, she wraps a shawl around her shoulders and simply stands at the doorway, watching the rain. She does not speak, and you do not disturb her. It is a kind of reverence, this act of witnessing. The morning meal is modest, dried lentils eaten cold, a sliver of preserved date, and a cup of water that tastes sweeter than any you remember. Your father tells you there is nothing to do but wait, which he has never said before, and so you spend the day wandering slowly between the corners of your home, watching how water finds its way into places long untouched, dripping from broken tiles, running in silver threads along the cracks of the walls, even forming tiny rivulets in the creases of the clay floor. The sound of the village is different now, not busy, not loud, but richly layered. The laughter of children splashing in shallow pools, the creak of swollen doors expanding with moisture, the rhythmic patter of rain hitting every surface with patient insistence. A boy passes the gate barefoot, holding a woven basket over his head, like a shield, carrying something wrapped in cloth, a message, perhaps, or food, or simply the joy of walking in the wetness without fear. You help your sister rearrange jars beneath the awning to better catch the overflow from the roof, and every time one overfills, you gently lift it and carry it to the storage area, the weight sloshing comfortingly against your hip. There is no sense of waste today. Every drop matters. Every container, no matter how small, is given a purpose. In the afternoon, the rain lightens for a while, thinning into a soft drizzle, and the light brightens just enough to make the damp stones gleam like polished metal. Your uncle arrives, carrying a bundle of soaked reeds meant for weaving, and he shares a small tin of honeyed nuts as a gift. You sit under the awning together, the air between you filled not with conversation, but with shared quiet, and eat slowly, the honey melting in your mouth like sunlight that forgot how to shine. He tells you, at last, about a rain he remembers from his youth, one that came in 3 waves, each stronger than the last, and how they lost 2 goats but gained a year's worth of barley. You nod, not because you know what that means, but because you understand it matters. Later, your mother makes a warm meal using a clay pot that has not seen the fire in months, barley cooked until soft, with bits of dried carrot, lemon peel, and a sprinkling of wild herbs. You eat sitting on the floor near the wall, the food hot against the chill in the air, the bowl steaming slightly as the rain returns to its full rhythm outside. You feel the heat of the meal seep into your fingers, your chest, your spine. After dinner, your father shows you the water jar nearly full to the brim, and for the first time, you see him hesitate before replacing the lid, as though part of him wants to keep watching it rise. He pats your shoulder, his hand heavy, solid, proud. As night falls, the village glows with flickering oil lamps behind wet, cloth-covered windows. The sound of the rain never stops, but it becomes softer, deeper, like the voice of someone finally whispering the ending to a long, unfinished story. You climb to the rooftop once again, wrapping your blanket around your shoulders, and lie back beside the still-burning oil lamp in its protective niche. The clouds above are thick, yet somehow luminous, glowing faintly from within, as if the moon is resting somewhere behind them, not hidden, just shy. The drops fall onto your face, your eyelids, your lips, but you do not flinch. You let them stay, let them speak, and as you drift into sleep, it is not dreams that take you, but memory, warmth, and the sound of rain doing what rain was always meant to do, arrive. The 50th day arrives not with fanfare or thunder, but with a quiet that feels earned, like the final breath after a long song, or the moment just after the last note fades, but before the silence settles fully. The rain has stopped sometime during the early morning hours, and now the village lies in a hush deeper than any before, not the dryness of waiting, but the stillness of fullness, of peace. You awaken slowly, your body reluctant to part from the warmth of the blanket, the cool air pressing gently on your cheeks like a soft farewell, rhythmic whisper of rain falling on every surface it can find, as though the sky has finally decided to speak after weeks of long, breathless pauses. The entire village has changed overnight. The rooftops glisten, courtyards shimmer with puddles, and the familiar scent of sun-baked dust has been replaced by a deep, earthy aroma that seems to rise from the very bones of the land itself. You wake slowly beneath your blanket, which has grown heavier with the damp air, and blink into the grayish light filtering through the linen draped over the rooftop's edge. It is not a sharp light, nor a warm one, just soft, even, and gray, like the inside of a pearl. There's no urgency in your movements as you sit up, no need for rush. The rain has taken over all the work, soaking, softening, cleansing. You listen as it drums against the storage jars, pings on the copper wash basin, and slides along the stone tiles like fingers tracing forgotten paths. The fig tree in the corner drips steadily, its branches sagging with the weight of water, and the puddle in the center of the courtyard has grown into a small reflecting pool where drops create perfect, endless rings. Your mother doesn't light the hearth today. Instead, she wraps a shawl around her shoulders and simply stands at the doorway, watching the rain. She does not speak, and you do not disturb her. It is a kind of reverence, this act of witnessing. The morning meal is modest, dried lentils eaten cold, a sliver of preserved date, and a cup of water that tastes sweeter than any you remember. Your father tells you there is nothing to do but wait, which he has never said before, and so you spend the day wandering slowly between the corners of your home, watching how water finds its way into places long untouched, dripping from broken tiles, running in silver threads along the cracks of the walls, even forming tiny rivulets in the creases of the clay floor. The sound of the village is different now, not busy, not loud, but richly layered. The laughter of children splashing in shallow pools, the creak of swollen doors expanding with moisture, the rhythmic patter of rain hitting every surface with patient insistence. A boy passes the gate barefoot, holding a woven basket over his head, like a shield, carrying something wrapped in cloth, a message, perhaps, or food, or simply the joy of walking in the wetness without fear. You help your sister rearrange jars beneath the awning to better catch the overflow from the roof, and every time one overfills, you gently lift it and carry it to the storage area, the weight sloshing comfortingly against your hip. There is no sense of waste today. Every drop matters. Every container, no matter how small, is given a purpose. In the afternoon, the rain lightens for a while, thinning into a soft drizzle, and the light brightens just enough to make the damp, Stones gleam like polished metal. Your uncle arrives, carrying a bundle of soaked reeds meant for weaving, and he shares a small tin of honeyed nuts as a gift. You sit under the awning together, the air between you filled not with conversation, but with shared quiet, and eat slowly, the honey melting in your mouth like sunlight that forgot how to shine. He tells you, at last, about a rain he remembers from his youth, one that came in 3 waves, each stronger than the last, and how they lost 2 goats but gained a year's worth of barley. You nod, not because you know what that means, but because you understand it matters. Later, your mother makes a warm meal using a clay pot that has not seen the fire in months, barley cooked until soft, with bits of dried carrot, lemon peel, and a sprinkling of wild herbs. You eat sitting on the floor near the wall, the food hot against the chill in the air, the bowl steaming slightly as the rain returns to its full rhythm outside. You feel the heat of the meal seep into your fingers, your chest, your spine. After dinner, your father shows you the water jar nearly full to the brim, and for the first time, you see him hesitate before replacing the lid, as though part of him wants to keep watching it rise. He pats your shoulder, his hand heavy, solid, proud. As night falls, the village glows with flickering oil lamps behind wet, cloth-covered windows. The sound of the rain never stops, but it becomes softer, deeper, like the voice of someone finally whispering the ending to a long, unfinished story. You climb to the rooftop once again, wrapping your blanket around your shoulders, and lie back beside the still-burning oil lamp in its protective niche. The clouds above are thick, yet somehow luminous, glowing faintly from within, as if the moon is resting somewhere behind them, not hidden, just shy. The drops fall onto your face, your eyelids, your lips, but you do not flinch. You let them stay, let them speak, and as you drift into sleep, it is not dreams that take you, but memory, warmth, and the sound of rain doing what rain was always meant to do. Arrive. The 50th day arrives not with fanfare or thunder, but with a quiet that feels earned, like the final breath after a long song, or the moment just after the last note fades, but before the silence settles fully. The rain has stopped, sometime during the early morning hours, and now the village lies in a hush deeper than any before. Not the dryness of waiting, but the stillness of fullness, of peace. You awaken slowly, your body reluctant to part from the warmth of the blanket, the cool air pressing gently on your cheeks like a soft farewell. Well, when you rise, everything is changed. Not dramatically. The homes still stand, the trees still sway, the clay paths still wind like ancient thoughts between the walls, but everything is touched by water's memory. The fig tree glows with a sheen of silver dew, its leaves brighter and less burdened. The basin in the courtyard holds a small pool, perfectly clear, reflecting the pale morning sky, like a mirror that has finally remembered what it is for. You kneel beside it and touch the surface with your fingertip, not to disturb it, but to feel it, to confirm it is real. The water ripples out and returns to stillness. Your mother is already awake, of course, wrapping cooled loaves of barley bread in linen cloth, her eyes calm and thoughtful. She tells you, in her usual quiet voice, that today is not for working, It is for recording, for remembering. She points to the old clay ledger by the hearth, its pages made of thin bark and stitched linen, and asks you to write down what you've seen, not the dates or amounts, but the feeling of it all, the colors of the sky before the rain, the weight of the air when it arrived, the taste of the first drop on your tongue. You take the book, your fingers tracing its brittle spine, and begin to write, slowly, carefully. The ink moves across the page, like water itself, uneven, absorbing, permanent. You describe the day the basin filled, the children who splashed without shoes, the way your father placed his hand on your shoulder and said nothing. And when the ink dries, you leave the book open in the sunlight, not to forget, but to share. Others come later. Your sister, your uncle, even the neighbor girl who always hides behind her mother's skirts, and they add their own lines in uneven, clumsy handwriting. Not full stories, just words. First splash, wind that sang, mud on my heel. Finally, the rest of the day passes like a quiet celebration. No music is played, but humming floats from many windows. No feasts are prepared, but families sit together and share boiled roots, dates, flatbread, and water like it is gold. Laughter rings out more often now, not loud or wild, but free. You walk through the village, stopping to watch the light dance across newly rinsed rooftops, to feel the dampness in shaded stones, to hear the sounds that only come after rain, the buzzing of reawakened insects, the slosh of jars being emptied into gardens, the creak of a wood that has swollen gently with life. You help your father dismantle the temporary cloth traps and let the sun touch the clay again. You and your brother sweep the rooftops of leaves that never made it to the ground. Even the goats seem to step more carefully today, leaving hoofprints in the soft, blackened earth. In the evening, your mother brings out a small jar of preserved rose syrup, saved for rare occasions, and adds a spoonful to each person's cup of water. The taste is sweet, fragrant, almost too delicate for the mouth, and yet perfect. As dusk settles, the sky turns not gray or threatening, but wide and pale and soft, the first stars blinking through without needing to compete with clouds. The village gathers near the central fire pit, not because it's cold, not because of duty, but because it feels right. You sit with your neighbors on folded mats, your shawl around your shoulders, your hands warmed by a shallow bowl of cumin tea. The stories begin to flow, not about hardship, not even about rain, but about old times and names not spoken in years, and lessons learned from days of thirst. You listen, and then you speak, and then you listen again, and all the while, the earth beneath you still carries the faint coolness of recent water, as if the land itself were not done speaking. When you return home, you find your mat already laid out on the rooftop. The stars above are so bright now, they almost sting your eyes. The air is crisp, the wind still, and your limbs relax in a way you didn't realize they hadn't until now. You pull the blanket over your chest, lie back, and feel the faintest breeze move across your face like a whisper. You no longer think about waiting. You no longer think about the sky. The rain has come, and it may come again, but now you know how to wait, how to hope without hurting, how to rest in the space between longing and receiving. And as your eyes drift shut for the final time in this long, quiet journey, the last sound you hear is your own breath, steady and deep, joining the rhythm of a land that remembers everything and forgives.